Okay, so we're going to go over cons for Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm going to try to make this video faster. I think the reason why the other video was so long was because it's really hard for me to find something positive about the area, and I also wanted to be as descriptive as possible because the pros to the area are so specific to the area. So you have all the information. Whereas the cons, they're pretty self explanatory. Um, so, cons, the city's segregated to this day. It's not technically segregated, but it is segregated. The white people live on the east end, the black people live on the west end, and the Cubans live on the south end. And never the the three shall meet. So they do at work. That's about it. And that usually doesn't go over well usually. So yeah, I mean it's still quite deeply segregated. Most of they segregate out the minority class from the East End, usually with money, pretty much class caste systems and money. So if you think there isn't a caste system and class system in America, you're only fooling yourself. So yeah, I mean it's fairly segregated. Uh, I don't mean fairly literally. It's very, very segregated. Uh, don't get me wrong. There's nice areas where minority culture lives in the area, but for the most part, black people. It's one of the poorest states in the country. Louisville doesn't fare much better, and a minority, especially a black person in Louisville or Kentucky in general, is going to be impoverished, and the only place they can afford to live is the West End. So, I mean, they don't have the options that the average, say, white person does in the area. And that's just the reality. They don't have the options to really move to Indiana or move to. I mean, if they're going to make a move, it's probably going to be to the South End. There is quite a large population in the South End still. But a lot of that black population are African immigrants. It's not like the classic African American. There are still African Americans in the South End. There's a lot of them, but for the most part, they're all on the West End because that's what they can afford, and that's where a lot of like Section 8 housing is and things like that. So, and like I said, crime is quite rampant over there. Usually when you have an impoverished community, crime is a lot higher. But let me tell you, they're bringing it, and they're bringing it all over the city, and that's another con. The crime rate has exploded in Louisville, and I mean it has exploded, and crime is pretty bad all around the city. Even in the East End, used to be safe living in the East End in certain areas of Louisville. It was a safe bet to live there, and you could live there relatively peacefully. That is no longer the case. There is no real safe part of Louisville anymore. Whereas in other cities, I have found they still tend to have nicer areas where it's a safer bet. Whereas Louisville, I can't honestly tell somebody that it's a safe bet for them to live there. If you want a safe bet in Louisville, move to Indiana. That's just the reality, which is also where all the white people live. So there are a lot. When I lived in Indiana, you had to remember I was going to grade school, elementary school in the late 80s and early 90s. And I did not go to school with a black kid until I moved to Tennessee, if that tells you anything. I mean, I've been around black people, and I was pretty much the only minority, and I'm mixed. So, yeah, that was really difficult for me. um, I got a lot of racial slurs. I got um, um, somebody that tried to call me his best friend and all the rest of it. In high school, he used to call me porch monkey. Yeah. um, and what's worse is I had a nicer house than he did. I had a nicer house. My parents made more money. We had a nicer pool. We had a nicer everything. He still called me a porch monkey. Yeah. So, I mean, if that tells you anything about that. So yeah, honestly, sometimes when you're like the only minority of any kind or one of the only minorities of any kind in a very white community, that can almost be worse than just living in or going to school in like say like a just a traditionally kind of hood school. um no, where I went to school in Tennessee, it wasn't a hood school or anything like that. um but there were a lot of black kids in that school, but that was the first time I ever went to school with black kids was when I was a junior in high school. So yeah. Problems. um the mindsets are still quite deep in that area, especially in southern Indiana. I mean, it's just if you want to be really real about it. Yeah, they're all quite racist. They'll try to paint themselves as not racist. And sure, there's still plenty of people in southern India that aren't. But I mean, there's still a lot of that mindset there. They're very racist, very deep, segregated white communities, and they segregated themselves with money and caste systems, class systems, rather than just outright segregation. So it's very bad in Louisville. Um, and I'm not trying to say that black people cause crime. I'm saying impoverished communities cause crime. And um, let's just be real, black people tend to be much more marginalized into that. So, yeah, I was lucky that I was able to, in certain aspects, I was able to live in a community like that. I was also very unlucky. Um, what else? Cost of living is great, but it's not what it used to be. The cost of living isn't the pool that it used to be, say, maybe 10, 15 years ago. Now, for somebody coming from California, it would probably look like a dream, especially if you're getting a job making even half of what you did in California. So incomes tend to be higher in California than they do in Kentucky. But let's say you were making $400,000 a year in California. Well, if you're making like say $250,000 a year in Kentucky, you're rich. You're gonna live an even better lifestyle than you had in California, real fast, real easy. So I mean that's something to keep in mind. Um, so if you have a certain type of career field that would translate over into the area, yeah, and you're going to be making good money, your money's going to go a lot further. Um, the whole area is impoverished. In the poorest county in America is in Kentucky. It's a kind of poor most people can only imagine. It is a third world country inside of a first world country, which America's kind of gearing towards that anyways in general. But it's a much more extreme in Kentucky and the South in general. But Kentucky, it's much more extreme. Um, some people say America is a third world country wearing a Gucci belt. That is definitely Kentucky, and Louisville is the Gucci belt. So, yeah. So it's incredibly poor. Just poor. You can't imagine poor. Just poor. Just everybody's poor. Everybody's poor. And the people that aren't, they definitely put their, their boot on the neck of people that are. You have a corrupt police system there. I mean, that's pretty much a fact. I mean, look at the Breonna Taylor case. Look at a lot of other cases. Breonna Taylor is the big one. The cops there, I mean, you could say that about anywhere, but in particular in that area, quite corrupt. It's a very corrupt police system there. What else? The minority culture is, like I said, is culturally diverse, and it is. And you have a lot of options. Like, you have all these amazing African stores and soul food places to eat, and fried chicken, and Cuban places to eat, and El Nopal is the local Mexican food chain, and they're everywhere. I mean, you have a lot of culturally diverse food in the area, and in that regard, and certain areas it's more diverse in a positive way, but for the most part, a lot of minority on minority hate. The blacks hate Cubans. The blacks hate all white people. And the white people hate all of them. And the Cubans hate the black people. And the Cubans hate Americans in general. And yeah. And it's there's a race war for sure. I mean, it's unspoken, but I mean, you spend any good amount of time there and really getting in your hands dirty, and rolling up your sleeves and taking a good look under the hood. Yeah, it's a race war for sure. It's just unspoken. I'm being general. That's not everybody. And does every black person there hate everybody? No, but in general, if you're got somebody that comes from deep in the West End and they lived there their whole life, they've been poor their whole life, and they have that certain West End chip on their shoulder, they're going to pretty much hate anybody that ain't from the West End of Louisville. Let's just be real. So, yeah, it's bad. Job market sucks. Unless you work manufacturing and know how to work manufacturing. I personally do. And I have a backup career in manufacturing. I'm good at manufacturing. I'm worked logistics on and off for 20 plus years. I understand logistics really well, and manufacturing really well. And that being said, when I'm in Louisville, I have to work manufacturing to make a living. I have to, because my regular job, there's just no job market for it. There just isn't. It's horrifying. I've had a few office jobs there. Let's just put it this way. The last office job I had in Louisville, I had put my ex-boyfriend into jail for beating my ass, and they told me to go walk in traffic while he was still in jail. So if that tells you anything about the work culture. So, yeah. Also, there isn't a whole lot of Southern hospitality in Louisville. You have to remember, it's Kentuckiana. There's some Midwestern vibes, which Midwestern people usually are quite friendly, and Southern people are quite friendly in certain types of ways. But for whatever reason, it all comes together into Louisville, and it has like the complete opposite effect. So people there, general attitudes in Louisville, not very friendly. People aren't there. It doesn't matter what background they come from. Black, white, Cuban, rich, poor, middle class, whatever, they're all unfriendly. They're just they have a lot of attitude. They're very smart ass. Um, um, they're very know it all. Um, and they can be from a Section 8 housing in the West End of Louisville, and they will have their nose all the way up in the air. I mean, I've never seen snobs like this in my life. And I work with lawyers. You know what I'm saying? You know, ultimate snobs. And I mean, they're just snobby by nature. But, and I'm not a snobby person because, like I said, my family comes from the eastern part of the state. So they're not really snobby on that end. They're very prideful. There's a lot of pride, but they're not very, don't get me wrong, there's some snobbiness here and there, but they're not snobby. They're just very, very prideful about where they come from and all that, especially if they really have something to show for themselves. And they should be proud, you know, especially in those areas because they're deeply impoverished. So, yeah, but no, Louisville snob. It's just they should rename it snob. I mean, they're all, not everybody, but you know, in general, there's a lot of snobbery. It's very, very snobby community. Um, Indiana's even worse. The Indiana side is even worse. Like I said, you know, um, Indiana kids, you know, they see a girl with olive skin and dark hair, and I'm a porch monkey. You know, I mean, they're just racist as shit and snobby about it, and it's baffling. Now, would